What's up guys, Asian here again with another dungeon guide video. This time we're going to be going over Bloodroot Forge. This is one of the new DLC dungeons that came with the Horns of the Reach DLC, so you're going to need to have access to that DLC, either that's through ESO Plus or from directly purchasing the DLC itself. As a DLC dungeon, it is more difficult than your base game dungeons. The bosses are going to be more mechanic heavy, and adds themselves are going to deal more damage as well as the bosses, so do keep that in mind before you attempt this on Vet Hard Mode. This is a dungeon where you're going to want to have a good team, a group of DPS, healer, and tank. We do have a new tank to this dungeon, so you're going to see a couple of skips here and there while we explain mechanics. That's just so you guys don't have to sit through too much of the time while we're explaining mechanics. So for this first section here, you can actually skip the first group of ads all the way up to the first boss. Just follow the path that we just took. You don't want to jump down where I'm standing right there. You kind of want to go over to this rock here and then kind of slide your way down to the bottom. That's because there is a wandering Minotaur nearby, and the Minotaur aggression radius is fairly large, so you just kind of want to avoid pulling that. If you jumped out too far to the right, you're actually within a large portion of the aggression radius of that Minotaur. This is the first boss here. Comes with 3 ads, a Minotaur and 2 melee ads. Just going to want to make sure to stand behind that tree there so you avoid accidentally pulling the boss. Boss herself doesn't have that many mechanics to deal with. She is only the first boss of the dungeon. Tank's going to want to take all of the 3 ads. That Wandering Minotaur can actually get pulled into the fight. You can see it over there on the right. So you do want to make sure people are kind of a little bit away from the that area so you don't accidentally pull that additional Minotaur. As you can see here, there will be red AoE circles that pop down throughout the fight. Just want to get out of those. After a certain point, she'll pop up a siege shield, and at that point, just rain down red AoEs everywhere. You want to be within that circle, so no AoEs will ever be inside that circle. So that's kind of where you want to stand when that pops up. She does have a frontal conal AoE move, so if as a tank you do want to face her away from the group, and DPS and healers you obviously want to stay away from the front of the boss. When the boss dies, if there is a red AoE on the ground, it'll continue to hurt you, so you do want to move out of any AoEs even after the boss dies. Coming up to the second boss here, there are no ads between the first and second boss, so you can go basically straight into the second boss fight. This is the Seige Mammoth. The boss himself doesn't have that many mechanics. It's kind of the people around him that are more troublesome. As you can see there are archers around that will deal damage to you and have special effects down. You can see there, that's one of them. You'll have red AoE fire circles that just kind of move down the field from the left and right. The boss himself will do a charge move, you see there, and he also has a heavy attack frontal cleave. There is no indication of that cleave, so you just want to avoid getting too close to the front of the boss. You want to stand to the side or behind. At certain health intervals, new effects will come into play. You can see there ice arrows are now raining down. That happens around 50% health. Those don't actually do much, they just kind of slow you down, so it's not really anything you have to worry about. I believe at around 40% health, they will basically set the mammoth on fire, and he'll gain a new move, a stomp move that deals some pretty hefty damage to people who are close by. You need to block and shield through that, otherwise it's a one-shot. Only the tank can really be up close to him, and even then the tank should block in order to avoid taking too much damage. As you also saw, after a certain period of time, health thresholds I should say, you will have fire arrows just continually raining down on you. Once you beat the boss though, you can go into Falkreath proper and start dealing with the ads. Now the Minotaurs are going to be your priority targets here. They deal a lot of damage, as you can see there. I didn't really have enough time to heal myself through that damage. While you're in Falkreath, there are going to be fireballs that drop down from random areas, like you see there. They will damage you and they will stagger you, so they are hard to anticipate, so just be aware of that as a healer. Just kind of make sure everyone's topped off on health. They can be particularly dangerous during these ad pulls. So there are three different types of minotaurs. The one with the maces are melee. They do have a couple of moves. You can see there they will leave fire AoEs on the ground, and they will also have a frontal conal AoE that's really just three small fire circles moving out in a conal direction. There is a mage minotaur. You can see him way in the back there. He deals fireball damage. He has a couple of moves. You can see there he will create a giant, what I like to call a minotaur standard on the person he's targeting. They'll slam the ground and create red AoEs. They target one random person. I believe it'll create 4 or 5 of them, so you just want to keep moving when that happens. And finally, he can make a shield around himself that will absorb, I believe it's 75% of the incoming damage. That's something you just have to be aware of. With the shield, doesn't actually completely mitigate, but it does reduce your damage by a fair amount. So as a DPS, you always want to focus down the Minotaurs first on these ad pulls. And now that's the third type of Minotaur. He has kind of a axe, battle axe. He doesn't really have any sort of special moves. He just has a heavy attack you need to block. Otherwise, it is a one-shot. So the ad pulls here, if you are going for the no death, are what's going to potentially be the most dangerous part of this dungeon. So you just kind of want to make sure everyone's healed up. You can see here I'm using mutagen fairly often. Mutagen is a very good skill to have as a healer, especially on these DLC dungeons for that extra burst heal. If you are dealing with 2 Minotaurs at once and one of them's the Mage Minotaur, make sure to bring the melee ones over to the Mage so that you can cleave both of them down at once. Don't be afraid to use the Warhorn, your Warhorn ultimate here, whether you're the healer or the tank. You saw I used mine just a couple of seconds ago. That'll really help out burning down these Minotaurs. They are fairly hardy, especially the mage ones once they have their shields up. The other ads, the Reachman ads, they aren't quite as dangerous as the Minotaurs. You have the standard mage and you have melee ones. Tank will want to taunt the melee ones, particularly the sword and board, and I believe there is a two-hander version of the Reachman ads, because that will be a one-shot to DPS and healers if they aren't blocking. You can see here the Reachman ads are obviously fairly easy compared to the Minotaurs. Go down fairly quickly. Now, if you are going for the speed run, you can what we call ghost this, which is basically just die to your any set of ads. You just keep on running until the next boss. That's only if you're going for a speed run. Obviously, you can't do this if you're going for a no-death run. The speed run for this is, I believe, 15 minutes, so it is fairly fast. So that's just an option for you to do if you're not really, you don't really mind dying and you don't mind using up a couple of soul gems. So for this part here, there are 3 Minotaurs. The mage one, there's a mage one and there's 2 melee ones that wander around, so you just want to, if you can, pull the mage one by itself, then pull each melee Minotaur individually, so you are avoiding receiving too much damage at the same time. It is a good idea to take care of the melee Minotaurs though, because one of them does wander close to the boss area, so you just want to make sure that he doesn't get in the way and accidentally gets pulled in while you're facing against the next boss. You can see there that is about how much damage you can expect to take from the random siege engines that pop up during while you're in Falkreath proper. So this is the next boss. It really comes in 4 stages here. This first stage, you have 3 bosses here. You can see them there. You have 1 two-hander, 1 mage who's going to be on the left, and 1 archer who's going to be on the right. The second stage is after you kill these 3, there will be a skull colossus that pops up. You basically bring them down to half health, and then you repeat the cycle again, except when these 3 pop up, they will have new abilities, which we'll go over once we get to that part of the fight. Once you kill them the second time, the Skull Colossus will spawn again, and then you just kill the Skull Colossus, and that's for that boss fight. So starting off, you're going to want to take care of the mage first on this first part here, or the archer, doesn't really matter which one. The tank should bring the melee add to one of the two. So when you kill one of them, they'll drop a kind of glowing circle around them. You want a DPS is going to need to step into it, and they'll be basically inhabited by that boss's spirit, and you need to bring them to one of those 4 glowing pads around the outside. Each pad can only hold 1 spirit, so once you drop the spirit off at one of them, you can't use the other one. So you can see there we have the DPS take those spirits, bring them over to those 3 sides. Now the Skull Colossus has spawned. During this part of the fight, he will have one move to watch out for. This is right here. Basically a ice comet. Just want to make sure those AoEs aren't overlapping with each other, so you don't want to be on top of somebody else's AoE, because that is going to be a one-shot. You basically have to shield and block so it doesn't stun you. You can see those ghosts floating around. They will fear you, and they won't actually damage you, but they will summon extra adds for you to deal with, so you just want to avoid those. Now for the second part here, you definitely want to go after the archer first. He has a new move that will basically inflict a very huge flame dot on you. You want to avoid that as best you can. So the archer is the one that you should go for first. The melee add basically gains a very large AoE centered on himself that also deals the burning effect. You can see there they both got the burning effect. You can heal through it. It's not as bad as the lava shulk, the lava burning effect from Bloodroot, but it is something to keep in mind. The mage add just gains the ability to teleport around, making it more difficult to kind of put him into one of those 3 spots. When a Skull Colossus spawns the second time, he doesn't gain any new mechanics, so it's just the same old avoid the ghosts. When he does his ice comet, just split up and shield and block. During the duration of this fight, you'll see there's this kind of a swirling circle around the arena. You can't exit that circle, otherwise you will get hit for a lot of damage. So you want to stay within the kind of circle area. It's very clearly defined what that circle area is. So from this point forward, you will no longer get hit by those siege weapons, obviously because you're underground. You will come back up, but once you are back up in Falkreath, you will not get hit by any siege weapons. Now for this part of the fight, while you're underground the Hall of the Dead, there is a synergy on these glowing pots that you should know about and use. The Draugr here, when they die, will have a shining beam on top of them. You basically need to get the synergy from the pot. It'll let you use the synergy on top of the Draugrs. Basically, any Draugr within that circle, a golden circle will form around you, will be cleansed and the body will disappear. You need to do this, otherwise the ghosts that inhabit these Draugr will basically find more Draugr to reanimate. It's not a huge deal for this portion though. It's only really if you have very low DPS that you're going to need to cleanse the bodies. For this next boss here, in order to start the fight, you need to cleanse the 3 bodies that are already out. It's going to spawn from the center there. He has a couple moves to watch out for. Throughout the fight, Draugr will spawn and he'll spawn more Draugr. When you kill them, you basically need to cleanse them because he will do a move. He basically creates a AoE circle around each person, and the more dead bodies there are on the field, the more damage it will deal. So you can only really have at most 2 or 3 bodies out on the field at a time. Otherwise, it just deals too much damage and it is a one-shot. He has a frontal fire breath move that does apply a weaker version of the fire dot from the previous boss. It's not really anything you should worry about as a tank. Even on the DPS, it doesn't really deal as much damage as it does on the previous boss. So you can see here, one of the strategies that you can use as a tank is basically chain the Draugr in, so that way it's easier for the DPS to cleanse the bodies. Now 2 Draugr will always have their health up, you can see there, and then all the other Draugr their health will slowly go down until they die. So that is something to be aware of. You might have bodies around the outside of the rim, of the arena that you're going to need to cleanse. So if you're a DPS and you're assigned to cleanse the bodies, do make sure to look around the outside of the room as well, because there may be dead Draugr there that you might have missed. It's very obvious if you have missed one, because they do have that glowing beam of light around them. So that boss is pretty straightforward, not too difficult. Just make sure to cleanse those bodies once they appear. It's best to have one DPS assigned to them and just have them cleanse bodies, drop dots on the boss. So a couple more ad pulls here. Same thing. If you have low DPS, you're going to want to cleanse the bodies when they die so they don't respawn on you. But if you have a high DPS, you can pretty much ignore it and just continue to push onward to the final boss. This is the final ad pull. Once you go through this door, you're going to be facing off against 3 Minotaurs, one of the 2 melee and the 1 mage. So you're basically going to want to pull those 2 melee Minotaurs over to the mage. Do keep in mind that you will be taking a lot of damage here, so you just kind of want to make sure you stay healed up. You can see the tank pretty much was one shot, just because he was taking a lot of damage, so that is something to be aware of. Or this last ad pull, there's a lot of damage coming in from those Minotaurs. After this final ad pull, you're going to go through the door into the longhouse, and you're going to face off against the final boss, Domihaus. You can see there that the Mage Minotaur did have the shield up, so it did absorb a lot of the damage that was incoming. Alright, so that's the final ad pull, and now we're going to go into the final boss room. To activate hard mode, there is a horn on your right when you enter. You just have to blow that, and that'll destroy 2 of those pillars. The pillars are going to be very important later on. We are going to skip ahead to the pull, because we do spend a couple of minutes here explaining the mechanics to our tank. So you can see here, hard mode just gets rid of the 2 pillars. Now you have 6 pillars around the room. So for this boss, everything is health based. So the boss basically goes in a cycle. When you first start off, he's going to create flames around the room there. You can see so you have to stay within the center of the room, DPS the boss. During this phase, he will suck you all in like so and create red AoEs around you. When that happens, you basically just want to slowly walk forward, avoid stepping into anybody else's AoEs, so you don't take too much damage. At 80% health, he's going to turn himself into a statue and summon 4 elemental Atronax. You need to take those out. He will do this again at 60% health, 40% health, and each time he's going to be in a statue for a shorter period of time. Immediately after this, he stops being a statue. He creates an AoE on the center of the room, which means now you have to step to the outside of the room. He will normally do this pounding move where he will kind of shoot out fireballs from the center of the room. Healers should just spam healing springs. You don't want to stand in the center there like the tank did. So you can see here he now shouted, and when he does that, you need to hide behind a pillar to avoid the one-shot. And then that just keeps going. He shouts at 70%, 50%, 30%, and 10% health. Those are the set health intervals at which he will shout. So the general strategy here is to make sure to mark one of the pillars. In this case, we chose the pillar to the left of when we entered the room, and just go in a clockwise or counterclockwise fashion depending on which pillar you decide to choose. Now you can see that you have 6 pillars, so you really only have space for really only not that much in terms of selecting pillars. It's very important that you all stand behind the same pillar, so you do have an extra pillar, 2 pillars to play around with. One thing to keep in mind is that he will only do his shout move when he has that AoE in the center of the room. During this red fire ring phase, he will not actually, he won't use his shout move. So that is something to keep in mind. If you hit to 50% health during that fire phase, he will immediately do his shout once the fire dies down, so you need to find that pillar and get to it. This is the 40% health statue phase. He's going to be in a statue for a fairly short period of time, so it's important to burn those adds down very quickly. If you have Magicka DPS, this is the time to use your Destruction Staff ultimate. And this is just going to continue on to a cycle until about 25 to 20% health. Once he gets to that health threshold, what's going to happen is he's going to start doing things in a cycle all over again. Once he hits 20% health, he will no longer become a statue when he summons those Atronachs. So what you're going to want to do instead, so basically what happens instead is he will continue to do the cycle of the Fire Ring, along with the what I like to call the Minotaur Standard. And then he's just going to keep doing that over and over again, and after each cycle, he will create more Atronachs. So after 20% health, it's basically Atronach summons are going to be on a cycle. He does his ring, he does his Minotaur Standard, then he summons more Atronachs. You can see here he now has a shield around himself around 20%. This is what we like to call the burn phase. When this happens, basically, the shield does the exact same thing as the shields and the Mage Minotaur adds around the that you had to fight outside of this boss fight. It'll absorb a hefty amount of the damage. I believe it is around 70-75% of the damage. So you can see here, that's a 10% shout right there. There is currently a visual glitch there. You can actually step into the center of the arena here, but the AoE actually won't appear, or won't disappear, I should say. So now he's just going to go in a cycle over and over again. He does the Fire Ring, he does the Minotaur Standard, then he's going to summon more Atronachs, and then he's going to do it one more time. So every 2 Atronach summons, he will shout. So you can see there he shouted again after 2 Atronach summons. So that is something to keep in mind. There is always going to be that one at 10% health, but after 2 Atronach summons, there's always going to be a shout afterwards. So that is something that can trip people up, especially if you have lower DPS. So that's it for hard mode. You can see the only difference between hard mode and non-hard mode is that you lose 2 pillars, so you have 2 less pillars to play around with, making the burn phase very, very important to get through very quickly, because you can only deal with 6 shouts before you basically have to completely wipe, because destroyed pillars will not protect you from those shouts. Plus, he gains a little bit more health on hard mode. So that's basically it for this video. Falkreath is definitely a difficult dungeon, so hope this guide helps, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.